I don't.
This is early recording for seminar 4, the 4 wealth strategy, wealth killers, their antidotes, and the golden summary. I'm gonna mute me so Joel can join. You know it's recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking.
Oh, that was a cowbell.
Cowbell.
More cowbell.
Sorry.
Hi, Maria. How are you? All right, Mike, you smarter than last time we talked?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's give about 2 more minutes for more people to get on and then we'll start. So Mike, I was talking to the title person in Sarasota this morning, and they had some interesting things to say. Yeah, I told you about the maps, but they said I didn't realize that flood insurance, obviously, I didn't even think about it, but flood insurance is a big thing there.
Yeah.
So apparently they have flood level like A to X, and so depending on where you rate in the scale, I
Wow.
guess everything is in the flood, well, on the flood map, right? And it's either in a floodplain or it's not. And then, but you know, there's a lot of associations, and you have flood insurance, you have regular insurance, and then, but cost of roof replacement is not that expensive. Oh, she was saying another thing which is really interesting. Basically said that at right now, the insurance companies, to be able to provide insurance, if your roof is more than 15 years old when you're selling, then they're going to probably make you get a new roof.
Really?
Yeah, they make you replace your roof.
Even if you have a 40-year roof?
Well, nobody has a 40-year roof.
Well, 30-year roofs or whatever.
Yeah, it says they last usually 20, 25 years, probably because they get a lot more storms than we do here. Most of ours is sun damage, the sun. So if it lasts 25 years, yeah, they don't like older roofs because I guess they feel like they don't withstand whatever hurricane force winds or something. I don't know.
Well, the mid states is the hail.
Well,
Hail
you're right,
pounds the roofs.
right. But anyway, that's what she was saying. Saying the other thing is that they weren't giving insurance for water heaters. If your water heater was old, she didn't know kind of what time frame, but she was saying on the roofs that if you had like a 15-year-old roof or more, then it was not uncommon right now for insurance companies to give you insurance at closing would require you to get a new roof, which is like $10,000 for a smaller property.
Wow.
So anyway, I thought that was fascinating. All right, well, let's start, shall we?
Okay.
Welcome. We're excited to be sharing this information today. All about how to lose money in real estate, and then the golden summary, which is really like, in my mind, sort of the objective of what you want your investments to be with long-term investments. So what do you want those properties to be like? And that's what the golden summary is all about. So 4 wealth killers. We talk a little bit really briefly about there we go. So with
Good.
Kobe, right, what we work to do as consultants is help people make informed decisions. So our goal is to provide investors with good information so they can build quality portfolios and then restructure them when they need to. This helps reduce risk and also helps the investors increase their returns. Our focus for our company is on small investors, long-term residential properties, 1 to 4 units, predominantly single-family homes, and helping them build and restructure portfolios that they can retire with. Now, the Knowledge Tower is very important for information that investors should know about. It's how real estate works, the landscape, the real estate landscape, that is the real estate market, the lending market, rental market, and what's going on in all of those and how they're trending up, down, sideways, etc. Knowing their own situation and about their portfolios and what the best opportunities are available. This seminar is specifically within how real estate works. So it is in that portion of the education department. 4 wealth killers. Mike, why don't you start out?
Okay, 4 wealth killers. Market downturn. You know, if the market shifts and goes down, and then own quality team. So we'll get into how that is all about. Loan quality property. So you need to have good quality property and problem tenants. You hear a lot of stories when it comes to tenants.
So with regard to market downturns, not all downturns are created equal. This is up until 2021. You can see that different markets through 2008 did different things. Louisville, Kentucky almost didn't have a downturn. Same thing with Denver, Colorado, almost didn't have a downturn. But Sacramento, California, and Las Vegas did have significant downturns. There were many, they call them the sand states, the California, Arizona, Nevada, Florida.
New Mexico.
What's that?
New Mexico.
New Mexico, yeah, they go up dramatically and then they go down dramatically historically. We are not seeing that, however, through this market cycle. We've seen a little bit of a drop in 2022, but for the most part, most markets have not seen a substantial drop in 2023 and 2024. So all downturns are not created equal, not only in market cycle, but even different areas around the country. So in 2000, I had a fourplex in Idaho that I bought in 2004, and I held it until 2011. And what really surprised me, this is where I really became aware of this, that markets are not created equal, is that the Sacramento market from 2008 until 2005 until 2012, the beginning of 2012, went down 68%. But over the same time frame, the market where I had my fourplex in Idaho went up 13% over that same period of time. So it went up a little bit, not very much, but the Sacramento market went more than in half. And now 15% of 819 US cities had a greater than 29.6% or 30% decline during the 08 crash. 64% of those cities had a greater than 10% decline. So more than half of the markets throughout the United States saw more than a 10% decline, and 15% of them, which was a lot of the California cities and some of the other areas like that, saw more than 30%. We saw 68% decline during that period. But we also saw a large draw up before then. So here's our Sacramento downturn from 1990 to 1997. It dropped 15% from 2005 to January 2012. It saw 60%. It was 6.5 years, 7 years for the first one, 6.5 years for the second one. And in 2022, it was 6 months. It went from May to December, and it dropped from 575,000 down to 480,000, and then it's been climbing ever since. Right now, we're at about 550,000 median price, Sacramento County. So the recovery over that period is 14 years, from August of 2005 to February of 2020, and then obviously it shot way past where it was before that period of time. Market downturn, basically, you don't necessarily lose rents. You can lose rents, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you will lose rents, either in price or that you'll lose tenants and have vacancy. But you will see the prices drop, and sometimes they can drop substantially. A low quality team will affect a couple of different things. Relating to the buy, your team is your agent and your lender. Relating to the hold, your team is your property manager and your contractor or handyman. Sometimes those, it's just your property manager because they manage whoever the contractor is. And frequently the lender or the agent will also refer the lender. So really your agent and your property manager are the most important. The agent must understand long-term investing. If they don't understand, they very well could put you into the wrong property. I know personally that there have been some investors, this is from talking to property managers, that it's not uncommon for investors who are older and are on like a fixed income, don't have a lot of money. They'll take some money and go buy a property because it's supposed to be a really good idea. Then they end up in a very low quality area. And we'll talk about that more in a minute, but low quality creates all kinds of problems. And so the investor, rather than reaping income through the term of holding the property, just reaps problems. Some investors or some agents focus on price and not on cost. That is, they're thinking, what does this property cost? And what are the returns through the rents, rather than thinking of what is this property going to cost me on a monthly basis due to repairs and tenant vacancy, things like that. They focus on the numbers, not on the quality of the property. You know, once again, going back to the bleeding attrition in the property over time, because some of that, the reason is they're not looking at deferred maintenance. Now, these are all mistakes that I've made in my career, more especially when I was new and a young pup and working with investors. And they kind of had to explain to me, here, this is why I don't want this property. Too much deferred maintenance. I know I'm gonna have to put a lot of money into this property over the next 5-10 years. Or, yeah, it looks really good, but I'm not sure I can keep the tenants a long time. So these things are important. Now with a poor manager, if you end up with a poor manager and you end up with poor tenants, I've had this happen to me as well. It can be very catastrophic for the cash flow and for the property as a whole. Can't get good tenants into a property, you're constantly going to have problems with that property, and then it just becomes a liability rather than an asset. If property managers are not taking care of tenants' needs, eventually tenants will leave, or they won't take care of the property, or they'll call the city and have them come out and inspect the property. For all those things happening. Property managers can be inefficient with time and staff. They can take off and be traveling all the time and not paying attention to the matters at hand that need to be taken care of. Property management is a constant work effort. Manages to cash on hand rather than cash flow. So I've seen this, and it seems to be pretty common upon property managers. They basically say, okay, this property is making $1,500 a month in rent, and we need a new washer dryer. That's only $1,000, so I can take it out of the rent. Not that they do, obviously they ask the owner, but I'll take $1,000 out of the rent as the manager to pay for a new washer dryer. Where somebody who's looking towards cash flow is thinking, oh, this owner, this property owner from that 1,500 not only pays me and not only pays whatever expenses they have immediately on the property, but they also probably have to pay a mortgage, or it may be funding their lifestyle. So instead of paying $1,000 for a washer dryer, maybe they'll hire somebody for $250 to come in and fix it. Not always the best solution, but not uncommonly. If you fix it, it'll last 3 to 5 more years, where a brand new washer and dryer will last 7 to 10 years in the first place. So you fix it 3 times, or you fix it once, and then the next time you buy a new washer and dryer, or you buy it from secondhand, where it'll last 5 to 7 years, but costs 1/3 the price or 1/4 the price from a new washer dryer.
Or you could go ahead and get a home warranty, which does cover washer and dryers, but now you have an annual expense added to it. But being able to have coverage for refrigerator, washer, dryers, etc., it allows you to sleep better at night. And then when something breaks, you get excited because you have coverage.
Yeah. Exactly. So that is really important if they're looking out for your best interest, which is your cash flow rather than how much cash you happen to have.
Right.
Now, and also be careful of actually a bad property manager, not just a less competent property manager, but a bad property manager. I've heard of property managers who, whenever a tenant left, it would cost $5,000 to $10,000 in repairs. It wasn't that that's what it needed, but inevitably the property manager just go out and figure, okay, well, we're gonna recarpet and repaint, and they usually take a percentage of whatever work is being done. So they're basically paying themselves another salary every time a tenant leaves. That can be a big problem as well. A low quality property. We did talk a little bit about this. Age, condition, features, layout. So age, here's some pictures from one of Mike's and my trip on property. These are just older properties. So what happens in older properties is stuff gets old and it falls off. Just like the ceiling falls off. Eventually it just decays and it falls apart. So you
Or it
constantly have
leaks
to be
and just,
working on it.
yeah, a lot of water damage in this one.
Yeah. So some of it would be the roof would leak and then it'd leak inside. And some of these properties were neglected. Some of them were lived in. And what we found is that after about 100 years, the lath and plaster just fall off the walls. So you had to put sheetrock over, or you had to additionally support the lath and plaster in some way such that being 100 years old, it wouldn't just fall off the wall. Yeah, I believe these were taken in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Property condition. When you're looking at the condition of a property, I like to look at it in 3 different ways. What are the repairs? That is, what needs to be fixed now so a tenant can move in? What's the deferred maintenance, which is what would need to be done at some point in the future? Now, that could be windows, it could be siding, it could be plumbing, it could be HVAC. Well, capital improvements are the more expensive things. So I frequently just track roof and HVAC and siding with that, but it could be in deferred maintenance or in capital improvements. It's not that you're necessarily improving the property, you're just trying to keep it in the condition that is livable for the tenants. And I've seen all those things be problems. Paint, carpet, really very common. A capital improvement I usually think of is like a new bathroom, new kitchen. It's getting old and people don't want to use it, or it's having more problems and need fixes all the time, etc. Repairs, basically these problems, they lower the rent for the size of the unit. If you have need more repairs or more maintenance, you're not going to get as much rent as the property down the stairs. It's the same size because people won't pay as much to live there. Next, you're going to have higher maintenance costs and repair costs because you're going to be sending people out on a regular basis to go fix things. Increased turnover. If somebody can go down the street for the same price and get something that's nicer, newer, repainted, etc., then they commonly will do that. And it'll take longer to rent up because all the ones that are in better condition are going to rent up before yours. Now, features, layout is really important. If people don't like the space, they don't feel comfortable in the space, it has bad juju, it's really dark, all those things contribute to renters not wanting to live there and just moving out quickly. I've had friends that have lived in properties where there was no backyard or very small backyard, so they moved out after a year, or multiple units, and so they moved out after a year, or they had mold and they were starting to get sick, moved out as quickly as possible, things like that. All those things help to contribute. If it's a bad layout, it's not comfortable. The same thing with a 3-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom. And there's a special type of tenant that will live in a 1-bedroom and will live there happy for many years. But then there's many more people who won't be very happy for very long. As soon as they get a dog, cat, girlfriend, or more stuff, then they're off to a 2-bedroom. And same thing with a 2-bedroom. they get a child or a girlfriend or have to work from home or whatever, then they might end up in a 3-bedroom. So then they end up moving out. So it increases the turnover as well, and sometimes takes longer to rent up because there's not as many people that want a 1-bedroom as that want a 3-bedroom. Lastly, tenant problems. So an A tenant will pay the rent, they'll stay longer, they'll keep the property clean, maintain the property, they'll work with the landlords. When the landlord calls, they'll call back, and they'll follow the instructions in the lease, something that they agreed to at the very beginning. D tenant, however, will not pay rent, or they'll pay on time. I'm sorry, they'll pay late and will not pay on time. They mess up the property, keep it dirty. They have other tenants that move in. They build things on the property. They break things on the property. Sometimes they'll break things and not tell the landlord or whether it be the manager or the owner. They won't tell them that it's broken, and then they'll and to add injury to insult, they will then call the city, have the city come out and inspect the property and find a lot more things that the owner / landlord needs to repair. In that case, just as added bonus. So I know one landowner that was trying to work with the tenant. The tenant was complaining about the bathroom. They were trying to get people in. They wouldn't let the person in to come fix the bathroom, but they did call the local TV station and had the local TV station come in so they could complain about the owner on live television, but not actually allow the owner in or their workmen in to do any work on the property. So anyway, some tenants can be great fun. Additional costs of these tenants: high cost of turnover and repairs, lots of stress and hassle. They take a lot of time, energy. You end up being the tenant therapist or the property manager. Somebody ends up being the tenant therapist. There are evictions, lost rent, vacancy, get more cleanup. Sometimes it'll cost you thousands and thousands of dollars just in cleanup after they've moved out, and it costs you thousands and thousands of dollars to move them out. So here's the summary of the four wealth killers: market downturn, low quality team, low quality property, and problem tenants. Now the antidotes. So here are the 4 antidotes to help to solve some of these problems: market selection, building a quality team, make sure you have a quality team, choosing a quality property, and buying in the right neighborhoods. So talking about market selection first. Market selection definitely affects appreciation. I showed you some graphs before, and we will look through some again. It can also lower your risks against downturns if you're in a more stable market than in a more volatile market. It also, market selection will also help to affect tenant quality. For example, here in California, we have rent control throughout the whole state. In many other states, they do not have rent control. Rent control, more than anything else, more than controlling how much the rent is, more frequently controls the access of the property. And what that means is how an owner is able to get a tenant out. Sometimes you can't get a tenant out. I had a client last year that couldn't get a tenant out, and eventually they just sold the property. Mike and I have worked with REOs, which real estate owned or foreclosed properties, where the tenant wouldn't leave, and eventually the bank, rather than foreclosing or rather than evicting the tenant because they couldn't get them to leave, they just sold the property under price with the tenants in it so the next person could worry about it. So
Yeah, which changed the rules of how you can do the eviction. Because in California, you got to have just cause, and just cause has a whole list of things, what you can't do and can do on getting a tenant removed from the property.
yeah. With regard to market cycles, there are different markets that have just stuff happens differently. Before 2020, this is the way that the markets all showed up. is generally one of four markets. At the top left, you have the wave, which was the up and down. That's California, Nevada, Arizona, Florida, etc. Predominantly in the Northeast, you have the stair step, which is it'd be flat and then it would go up and then it would be flat and then it would go up and then it would be flat. Very interesting. I'm not sure why it does that in the Northeast, but that seemed to be where it was. And then in the heartland, you really had just kind of the steady eddy going up in pretty much kind of a straight line, like Cedar Rapids, Iowa in this case, at number 3 on the top right, and straight line. And then lastly, the hockey stick, which is up until about 2012. These markets were generally considered kind of straight line. They were very stable markets. And then all of a sudden, like in 2012, everything jumped up and the prices just went gangbusters and went crazy. Now, here's how some markets vary. Once again, this is Akron and California. You can see that some are more stable and not as extreme, and some are more extreme. So the market solution, the market downturn solution is two caveats. When volatile markets are down, buy in volatile markets. When volatile markets are up, buy in stable markets. Which means that when if you're in a volatile market and it's at the trough, then you should buy real estate. But if you're at a peak, then it's probably better to go move your money from a volatile market into a stable market. Now, that being said, the market has shifted dramatically, and that's why I put in this slide. If you go to GoBeRight.com and you look up under our blog and go to, or you can just type it in from here, and we'll send you the slides afterwards. The 15 macro trends influencing supply and demand. Basically, what we found a year or two ago is that everything has changed with regard to market cycles. Currently, the market is going up, but just 1% or 2% a year from last year, from the summer of last year. So there's not that much difference in the market. Many markets are overpriced relative to what people can afford, and it's hard for buyers to get into homes because of that. As the interest rates have increased, it's more expensive. So what we did is we did kind of analysis of supply and demand and different trends to see where the prices are likely to go. What we found is the thumbnail of this is they're probably not going to go down. My conclusions were if the interest rates went up substantially, then the market's likely to go down because it just prices a lot of people out of the market. But other than that, there's a lot of trends that are pushing the market higher. Mike, what do you think?
Yes, that's correct. So if we see an interest rate drop by next year, the frenzy is going to happen. So the question is when do you step into the market? There really isn't a bad time to step in. The question is are you willing to step in and pick something up along the way? And if you do it right and the correct way, you can weather any storm in the future. So it doesn't matter if the market shifts, as long as you do it correctly, you can ride that storm out.
Yeah. Second, team selection, finding good people who understand the residential market, people who understand investing, people understand what makes an investment a good investment and a bad investment, how you lose money, how you make money. This presentation right here is all about how you lose money and how you protect against it. The other presentation on that we had at noon today on 5 ways you make money is all about how to make money. So choose properties that will perform well and select tenants. These are things that a team should help you do. A team should be able to help you, that is your agent, should be able to help you understand where the market's at, if it's going up, if it's going down, if it's flat. Understand where the good neighborhoods are and be able to select properties that are in good condition or that you're able to rehab at an economical price. To avoid also the areas where there might be rent control or large HOAs or other considerations which would be a detriment to your cash flow. So an agent is an extremely important part of the selection of the property. They should also work with the property manager to help to find the neighborhoods that are going to perform well. And performing well is finding A and B tenants, which means a tenant who will pay, wants to stay in the property a long time. They pay on time and they keep the property in good condition. So a manager will find those quality tenants. They'll work with the tenant when there are problems or issues and help solve those problems within the property. When they're doing all of this, they'll help also to reduce expenses wherever possible. So an agent, a quality manager are super important to having investments. Now, if you are the agent, you're selecting your own properties, and you are the manager, you're managing your own properties, then it's important that you understand all of the different aspects of it such that you can be a good agent and manager for yourself. Next, property selection. We want properties that are in good condition, that don't have a lot of deferred maintenance, and properties that are quality properties where people want to live. So let's talk a little bit about condition, repairs, maintenance, capital improvements, and location. That was quick. Yeah, any questions about condition? Basically, you don't want it. Well, when I buy a property, I want it to last for 10 years. So I want all the repairs done. I want all the deferred maintenance done when I move into the property and not be expecting to do any capital improvements. That is roof, HVAC, kitchen, water heater, bathroom, siding, painting, all that kind of stuff. I expect that to be done when I move into the property. So it can already be done, or I can do it after I move in. I consider that part of my investment in the property. But anyway, when I'm looking at property, that's what I want, because I don't want tenants to come around in 2 years. I don't want to have to put $5,000 or $10,000 into a property in 2 years. I want to not have to do that for 10 years.
In other words, you don't want to buy a major fixer up front unless that's
Unless
what
that's the
you need.
intention.
Yeah, but that's
the strategy.
yeah. One thing about Joel and I, we each have a portfolio. This stuff that we're talking about, we actually practice and do in our own personal portfolio. So this has been tested and proven and works. You can have less problems and less
And a
hassle.
lot of this stuff we've learned from not doing it and realizing
Oh
it's
yeah, that's
important.
correct.
That's why we're sharing it.
We made all the mistakes. So that way you can learn from our blunders.
Yeah, learn from us getting schooled and not from yourself.
Yes.
So with regard to location, where do people want to live? How far of a commute do they want to have? What kind of shopping do they want? What quality of schools? Properties will rent everywhere, so it depends on the quality of area that you want, and that's going to depend on kind of the price range that you're in. Try and get the best area for the price that you can afford with the best rents. And you're looking at those three sort of on a triangle, which is, what's the best property that you can get in the best area and the best rental return. A lot of people look at, as I was mentioning, they look at a property in a D area because it looks like it's the least price property and it is the best rents of those that are available on the market. But then when you count in that the tenants aren't going to want to live there, they're not going to take good care of it because all the neighbors in the area don't have respect for the neighborhood. And your tenants are going to either feel uncomfortable if they do and leave, and somebody else who doesn't have respect for their surroundings is going to come in because that's where they do feel comfortable. So areas attract that kind of stuff. You want to find those three things: a quality property in a quality neighborhood with good rents, and that'll serve you better long term. And that's what we're going to talk about in a minute with the golden summary. You don't want it to be by train tracks. I mean, that's not terrible, but it's not ideal either. Bars are worse. Freeways, same kind of thing. There's always traffic going through. Trash and dumping. Is it a place where there's lots of homeless and people are dumping garbage all the time on your property? There are a lot of people coming by because it's right next to a commercial area, etc. The neighborhood selection is really important. You want Class A and Class B. Class A is good proximity, right of ownership, good size, comfortable for people to live, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, larger square footage, at least 1,400 square feet, etc. I think is stuff that's important. If it's newer construction, it's even better. Generally speaking, a Class A property is the newest, biggest, nicest area and property. But so here's some pictures. Class A is the nicest, has the largest lot. Class B, nice properties, but they're a little closer together, not quite as nice as Class A. Class C is smaller, typically older, and the areas are kind of more bunched together. There may not be as amenities. Class D, you'll have commercial, you'll have like there you can see the left side of the picture is commercial right next to residential. There's no curb, gutter, and sidewalk. The street just runs right into the yard, and they don't have a yard per se. It's kind of parking space and mixed with grass and shrubs and things like that. So I think of it as Class C is your first time homebuyer neighborhood, Class B is your move up neighborhood, and then Class A is kind of your elite neighborhood. Another thing that I believe is really important, if you look at the different area and what the average price is for the area, and your real estate agent should be able to find out what the average selling price is for those areas. And then you can look on, rentometer.com. I know they produce things for both zip codes and cities. You can look for the average rents in the area. So I did a little bit of research on my area, found these are the prices. This is a few years ago. Average prices, average rents. That creates a gross rent multiplier, and the year built and the average square footage. So just looking at the bottom of Natomas, it seems to come out ahead. It was built newer. Average square feet is comparable. The gross rent multiplier is substantially lower than everything else. Even though the rents are comparable, the Natomas compared to Roseville, $100,000 less. And once again, this is a few years ago. Summary of the anecdotes. Market selection, choose a good market. Select your team, knowing what it is that you want them to produce, and then finding those people that can produce that. Property selection, choose good stuff, and choose a good neighborhood. Now I want to go to the golden summary. So this is something that took Mike and I a long time to create. It's really what's our objective in finding a property. Now, this is sort of the way that you come to a strategy. You need a strategy, which is, what am I going to buy? That is, what type of property? How much is it going to cost? Where is it going to be? What's the condition of the property? What's the number of bedrooms and bathrooms? What kind of neighborhood is it going to be in? Those are all the kinds of things that are strategy. How am I going to find it? What am I looking for? Where am I going to get the funds, etc. That's all strategy, and that allows you to move from one property to building or to restructuring. That your strategy is what gets you to your objective. Your objective is, what do I want? It's what do I want? Why do I want it? And when do I want it? So do you want to build a portfolio of properties? You want a certain amount of cash flow? Do you want the properties that you have to stop giving you headaches? You want to get rid of some tenants? Do you want to travel the world? What are the things that you want? Do you want to pay for your kids' college? So it's taking first your objective. That's why it's number one. Then going to your situation. Okay, this is the money that I have, the situation that I am in, the time that I have, my family situation, my expectations and responsibilities. And well, what is it that, what are the assets that I have that I can work with? Number three is the environment. That is, what's the landscape in the marketplace? What are things selling for? What can you buy a good investment for? What makes sense? What doesn't make sense? What's overpriced? What's the insurance amounts at? Are the taxes? Can I get lending on a certain type? Do I have the skills for a flip or for a fixer upper? And if I have the skills, then where do I get the support for that? What is that environment that surrounds you? And all of that goes to create the strategy, which I talked about. Now, just speaking of the objective, the what and the why and the when, we came up with the golden summary, which is if these are part of your what, that is what you end up with, then you're very likely going to have some very successful real estate investments. So these properties, and there's 7 items within the summary, which should be part of your objective and your strategy to help obtain these things. So anyway, let's go through them. A good property. You want a nice place to live that attracts tenants and keeps them long-term. That's a good property. Property in good condition. You're not spending a lot of money on repairs and maintenance over a long period of time. You want a good neighborhood, someplace where the tenants want to live, that they're not transitioning out all the time. There's something that supports their lifestyle. And one that you feel comfortable with. You want a good market, one that's going to hold its value and increase in value over time. And when I say a few environmental and legal concerns, what I mean by environmental concerns are, does it have hail? Does it have tornadoes? Does it have avalanches? Does it have mudslides? Does it have cold? Does it have snow? Does it have hurricanes? What does it have? Fires, yes. So what are all those things or any of those things that may affect this property? And will that affect the insurance? Will it affect it directly? And then legal concerns, like how much does it cost to evict a tenant? How long does it take to evict a tenant? What is the, can you get a tenant out in the first place? Do you have property management concerns where they're spending a lot of time and it costs them more money on your property to get anything done with the tenant? Those are all things that have to do with the market, because each market is different and has benefits and drawbacks. Next is it occupied by a good tenant? Is it somebody who pays on time? So this is really important. You can have not a very good property and not very good condition and not a very good neighborhood and not a very good market. You could still have a good rental because you have a good tenant, somebody that's paying on time and consistently, bought at a good price, and they pay all the time regularly.
And sometimes you can find and purchase properties that are already occupied, and you can check with the management company and look at the history of that tenant, and then you just basically take over. I've bought properties that way before. Where the
I
tenant
bought
was
properties that
already
way
there.
too, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that just, not that they're out there in heavy amount, but you do come across them. And
Yeah.
so what I've learned is call the property management companies and see if any of the owners are looking to sell. Because the property management companies still want to continue to maintain the property.
Yeah, and just because an owner is selling doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the property. Sometimes it's their own personal situation.
Correct. And I have that situation going on right now. I have a 5-unit complex in Tennessee, and I have a partner, and there's some medical issues with the partners. This is one of those properties I would never sell. I would hang on forever, but because of the situation, we need to sell it. And the tenants are just incredible. The cash flow is really good. It's just a great property. So, people have different situations and scenarios that pop up all the time.
Yeah, but you're selling it because of your partner's medical
Because
condition.
of the partners, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then we own other property too, so I'm gonna buy them out of the other properties.
Right.
And keep them, because I really don't want to sell, but I can't purchase their half for all the properties that we have together, so.
Managed by good property managers. So make sure you have a good property manager, because that keeps the tenants happy, keeps them in longer, it keeps them paying rent, and your expenses low. And lastly, be a good owner. Use good oversight. I have heard lots of stories of owners who just make bad decisions, and they put it on the property manager to execute the decisions when those decisions should have never been decided on. It should have been something else that should have happened. It was just the owner was not providing either good oversight. Sometimes they're not watching anything that's going on. The property manager just goes wild. Sometimes the tenant goes wild, and the property manager wants to do something but can't get the owner to step forward and get anything done. So there's lots of different reasons why people can lose money, but be a good owner and have good managers and keep good tenants, and that'll keep you in a much better situation with your investments. So if you do all these good things, you'll have a world-class investment here in the United States. If all of these things are done, good property in good condition, in a good neighborhood, in a good market, you can keep the property 30, 40, 50 years, and it'll perform for you well all of those years. It's not that there won't be a year where you'll go negative on it. There certainly will be, just because you have to replace roof at some point and HVAC at some point, etc. But overall, it'll be a very good property most years.
And if you
So
don't want to do the heavy maintenance on it, a roof or whatever, what I've done in the past with some of my properties is you basically sell it 1031 exchange into a younger property and start the process all over. Because there are investors and buyers out there that will buy properties that need work and need repair. So if you don't want to go through the hassle and do it, just exchange out of it and buy another property that's much younger.
yeah, and there are investors out there that want to do that kind of work.
Yes, many.
So just a reminder, we're here to help investors make informed decisions that help to reduce their risk and increase their returns. And we do that by helping them build portfolios and restructure those portfolios to help them towards retirement. So, are there any questions? Well, we will send you the slides. So if you have any questions in the future, you can certainly give us a call. And we appreciate everyone coming, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Have a great holiday weekend.
Thank you.